It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and with us today to talk about an upcoming feast of Christ the King is our good friend, Megan Swaim. Thanks for being here, Megan.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. So, for those that don't know, you were in our diocese working doing youth ministry, and now you've left us. How's the move been?
It was a little rough at first, but it's really good now. We're out in Maryland now, in the northern part, about an hour northwest of Baltimore. We moved right before we had our third baby this summer, just about 4 weeks before she was born. But now we're settled in. We have a good parish, how to have 3 children and keep track of all of them. So life is looking pretty normal for us now.
Yeah, I think everybody loves moving like 4 weeks before having a baby.
Yes. Well, one good thing, though, is it provides a lot of... Yeah, it provides a lot of really good perspective. You get all of the really hard things done all at once so that when those are over, it's like really silver lining. It's like really, I'm okay, this is great. This is not moving. This is not being really pregnant. This is not having newborn. Everything feels great.
Yeah. Well, I was reading this article that you had submitted and posted on CatholicMom.com about celebrating the feast day of Christ the King. And do you actually do these things? It sounds like beautiful and magical and, perfect mom and everything like that. And I read these and I'm thinking, I should be doing this with my family. But then I never do. Or if I do, it's always like some like really half version of it. So do you actually do all of these activities with your kids?
So I try to pick a couple of feasts a year to really focus on and try to see, now, like what's going to work for our family right now and what does our family need right now to kind of orient us in our life. But then other feasts maybe we won't celebrate or won't get as much attention because I just found I just can't celebrate all of the feasts in a meaningful way because we just get too tired of it or I end up doing them all pretty poorly. So this year we want to focus on that one because I think it's really important for where our family is right now and what we need to grow in. So, yes, this one we will celebrate up really big, but Thanksgiving actually isn't going to be very big for us this year. So Thanksgiving is going to take a backseat to Christ the King this year because I can't do both really big in like 3 days.
Yeah.
So,
have you done Christ the King? You celebrated it in the past with your kids?
No, we haven't. We've talked about it, like on the way to Mass or on the way home from Mass. But the idea of a king hasn't really been very concrete for them before. But right now, being 3 and 5, kings and queens and prince and princesses is a big thing for them, and they play it pretty constantly. So this seems like a really good time for them. In addition to, they're just now finally starting to understand things like we have a president, we have leaders, they make rules, we have to live by them. So I think it's a good time to introduce them to this idea that Christ is our king.
Yeah, and you mentioned that being Thanksgiving weekend. So Christ the King, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, is a week from Sunday. So it's Thanksgiving weekend. Do you see any connection between Thanksgiving and Christ the King?
I do. I was reading an article a couple of weeks ago, actually, that was talking about how one of the aspects that we kind of forget about Christ the King is to look back. So much of the feast is about looking ahead to the King who's coming in triumph. But an equally important part of the feast is looking back at how the King has provided for us and to remember that all time is a gift. And so what has Christ the King done in this year of gifted time that he has given us? How has he provided so perfectly for his people, whether that be in a lot of blessings and a lot of really good things, or in sharing his perfect cross with us to unite us more fully with his heart. And so I think that ties in really well with Thanksgiving, especially for families with young kids. You have just done this kind of exercise of thinking about, okay, what are the things in our life that we're thankful for? And then to be able a couple of days later to take that list and say, how did all of those good things ultimately come from Jesus? And so then to begin that season of Advent anticipation with a heart of thankfulness, that all of these good things that we've seen in our life are a gift from God. And let's not take them for granted. Let's say, praise God for the gift of our family, our home, our food, even those little crosses that are helping us to become more and more like him, or help us to feel that intimacy with his heart more fully. So I think the timing this year is really good.
And I think that's interesting. You talk about the looking back and looking forward. Not only do we probably not think about or celebrate Christ the King in our families very often, at least most of us, also I think we don't really think of the liturgical year that much. And so Christ the King kind of marks the end of the liturgical year. And then so you kind of look back, what you were talking about, but then also it's leading into Advent and the new liturgical year. So it's kind of this transition point, which I think we don't think of in our families, thinking of this is a new liturgical year. We think Advent and that's about it, if anything, right. or we think pre-Christmas or basically like, let's just get Christmas started now. So right. I think being intentional about that is important, and for us to think about that and talk about it as a family, and what can we look. I actually think of it as like a new year, because it's a new liturgical year, and say, hey, how have we been doing spiritually in the past, and what can we do, leading up to Christmas, this Advent, what can we work on to have a better liturgical year this and that, like kind of a New Year's resolution thing spiritually, maybe. Right,
exactly. I think this idea of we're waiting for our King to come in triumph. Advent, it really is this season of waiting. And Advent really focuses on a similar thing, too, in that the readings are pointing to the people who are waiting, and not just for this newborn Messiah, but for the King to return in triumph. And that's something I think I forget as a Catholic woman. I get so mired in the details of my life, or in the anxieties, or, all the things that are going on, that I forget that I really am waiting for the King to come again. That Christmas is, yes, about the coming of the newborn King, but also this promise that is kind of whispered throughout the whole liturgical year and really inserted into the whole liturgical calendar, is that he's coming again. And so it's a really good time for us to look ahead, to remember, we're preparing our hearts not just for the newborn King, but because he promised us he's coming, and we want to be ready. We want to be ready to welcome him with hearts that are modeled after his own heart. So it's a really good time to kind of take stock and say, okay, where am I as a disciple of Jesus? Am I following as closely behind him as I can? And if not, okay, now what kind of resolutions can I make so that I can, in this new year, try to walk more closely with him in prayer, in practicing virtue, in generosity, and all of those little things. How can I be ready for the King who is coming? Mm-hmm.
We're talking with Megan Swaim about the Feast of Christ the King, also known as the Solemnity of our Lord Jesus Christ, King of the Universe. And you can check out her article at CatholicMom.com about how she's going to celebrate this with her family. Can you talk about some of those things? What are you going to be doing with the kids to get them involved with the feast day?
Well, one of the things that we'll do is make a feast for the King. My kids are just now getting into preparing little snacks or foods that they can prepare themselves, whether it's putting cheese out on a plate, putting grilled cheese on the stove, wrapping up hot dogs and crescent rolls, really little silly things. But they are starting to really like to prepare things themselves. And so we're going to have a feast of things that they can prepare or invest in. So, we'll ask at the grocery store next week, okay, what do we want to make for our feast for the King? What is that going to be? And so we'll prepare a meal together to eat as a family that we've invested. Each person has invested a part of themselves in. And then at our meal, we'll start talking about what are those resolutions that we can make as a family for this new liturgical year. How can we more specifically grow as subjects of the King? So we'll start with a feast and then kind of move to how can we help our family make that resolution more doable and maybe more practical. So this year I thought about making crowns for our King. So we'll make some crowns, write some things that we're thankful for on it, the ways that the King has provided for us. But then we'll kind of set the crowns aside to use throughout Advent. That every time we've practiced that resolution that we've made as a family or individually, we'll add some kind of decoration to the crown, whether it's a little jewel or sticker or coloring on it, so that through the season of Advent, as we wait for the King, we'll build these beautiful crowns that we can then present to Jesus. And so that'll be, one way that our Christ the King celebration will continue throughout Advent. So we can kind of keep Jesus in mind, and not just the newborn King, but again, the King who's coming again, the King of the universe.
Did you come up with this yourself? It seems like such a great idea. It's like a Advent calendar, a Jesse tree, Christ the King, kind of all thrown into one here.
Yeah, I did. I was actually brainstorming some craft projects for a mom's group that I'm a part of at my parish out here in Maryland. And it just kind of came to me one day as we were making Halloween crowns for my daughter's Halloween costumes.
Huh.
And they were so into making crowns. And I thought, we could take this thing that they're naturally into right now and be able to use it as a teaching moment. Last year we did, I guess for the last 2 years, I've tried to do the manger with the baby Jesus and adding pieces of hay. And they just didn't get into it. I think maybe it was too much of a stretch for them, or maybe hay was not as exciting to them as putting fake jewels on a crown. So I thought, okay, that's not working for us right now at this time in our life, but this really might. And so, okay, let's change gears and try something new. And it just kind of all seemed to fit together.
Yeah. What will you use, to get real practical here, what are you going to use for the crown itself?
We'll just use some gold cardstock that I have. You could use construction paper. You could use really even plain white paper, because it's going to become decorated over the course of the month leading up to Christmas. So you could really use any kind of paper. You also can pick up just plain crowns from a craft store. They sell them usually in packets of like cardstock or cardboard, plain crowns that have the notches in them that you can fit to each kid's head.
Right.
We're just going to probably go the construction paper and staple route, because they already love that. It doesn't have to be more complicated or more expensive than that.
Yeah.
That already makes their day. But you could get fancy with it.
And it gets them a little bit creative. They can design it how they want, and you can help them a little bit too of how you want to design the crown. I think this is such a great idea. And I think it's really important for us to think about how we can involve the kids in these feast days and get them active and participating while teaching them and sharing some of these richness of the faith that is, I think, oftentimes overlooked. I know myself, we easily kind of forget these things, especially getting wrapped up with the holidays and Thanksgiving and stuff like that.
I think it's important too for them at this stage to see my husband and I are also trying to practice these same virtues.
Right.
And so we're going to make crowns too, and they'll get to see when we add things to our crown. I think, especially in the days that there's a lot of disciplining,
Right.
That they can see that we're also practicing what we're preaching.
Yeah. Well, again, you can check out the article. It's at CatholicMom.com. It's celebrating the Feast of Christ the King. You can check out Megan at Instagram. Lady Swaim is her handle over on Instagram. Thank you so much, Megan, for joining us. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.